I sincerely don't see a lot of difference in coverage from when he was a candidate and when he became the Republican nominee, the president-elect, and indeed the president. Some outlets, some people cover him the same way, and it doesn't have a great deal of respect, I think, for the office of the president, its current occupant. All I would say is, bias coverage, people talk about that. I think bias is easy to detect, and it's really in the eye of the beholder. What I would put an olive branch out to you and your network is, how about more complete coverage? In other words, he's issued 20 or 21 executive actions since he took office, and it seems like we're covering one of them most days. I would love to talk to you about the human impact of opening up the Dakota and Keystone pipelines, of taking these...
It caused tremendous chaos and confusion at airports all around the world. There's now a court case with your Justice Department. It's probably going to take it all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. Of course it's a huge story.
No, it is, but there are other stories. I'm just trying to, again, reach out and say, when we start doing opioid use, in a very meaningful way, along with the legislatures, law enforcement, the governors, talk about a bipartisan, if not nonpartisan issue, the veterans, then I really feel like, my big comment is that this White House and the media have joint custody of our country for perhaps the next 8 years. And count me as somebody who very much wants to find a way to make that work. But at the same time, I do have to say, when we read certain words being used to describe the President of the United States, it's never been done. It wasn't done about President Obama. It wasn't done about either President Bush, President Clinton, because people have a certain respect for and a recognition of the dignity for the office of the president. And so I am beseeching everybody to cool it down a little bit here and there. There are some stories that are false. There are some stories, I read them and I'm like, who are they talking about? Where does this happen? We're here serving in the White House.
Have you or President Trump ever said anything incorrect? Have there any falsehoods coming from your mouths?
Well, I did this past week, and I regretted it tremendously because I used the wrong word to describe something several times. And I'm sorry, because I've spoken literally millions of words on TV, I'm sure. I've been on CNN over 1,000 times in my career, I'm sure. And
you're referring to the Bowling Green massacre.
Yes, I am, because I felt really badly about that. But I am glad that I felt badly about that, and I apologize and I rectify. But I want to say something else about that. I'm very happy to have raised awareness. I'm told by colleagues at ABC that by Friday, the highest trending article there was an article from 3 years ago on ABC.com, because it was what I was referring to when I was referring to two Iraqi nationals who came to this country and are still in jail, are part of Al-Qaeda. I'm glad to have raised awareness. I'm sorry that I did it inartfully. I never meant to mislead.
You cited a massacre that didn't happen. You said the media didn't cover it.
No, what I meant is the media didn't cover the masterminds. The massacre happened in Iraq. The masterminds were here.
The media did cover the masterminds.
A little bit at the time, but again, but we're not covering it in terms of the extreme vetting. In other words, the judge, this is an important point. Yesterday, the AP had a fact-check story. I thought it was really well done. And I'm sure CNN covered it, Jake, but it's really important because the judge in the Seattle case, Judge Robart, asked the attorney, hey, how many people have been arrested since 9/11 from these 7 countries, would have been subject to this extreme vetting? And she said, I don't know. And he said, I'll tell you the answer is 0. That's false. It is not 0. The 2 guys at Bowling Green qualify, a guy in Texas. It's not true.
But Kellyanne, I guess the problem is it is very difficult to hear criticisms of the media for making mistakes, and certainly the media makes mistakes. But it's very difficult to hear those criticisms from a White House that has such little regard day in, day out for facts, for truth, and who calls us fake news for stories that they don't like.
Well, Jake, let me just say, we have a very high respect for the truth, and I can only speak for me, and I'm sorry that I misspoke. It wasn't like I was trying to get people to believe something existed that didn't. That's easy to figure out, even though the network I was on...
You cited it a couple times before that one interview.
Yes,
you know that.
Well, I was misquoting. I should have said masterminds, and I've talked about all that. But let me just say this on the broader point, that we have a high regard for the facts, but I want you to see some of the other facts that we're doing. I mean, the wages that are being boosted, the jobs that are being created, the people that text and write and email and stop us everywhere just to say thank you. It's a big country out there. You know that. You've covered it. It's a huge country out there of people who not just voted for him, but believe that he's going to improve their lives.
Sure,
And
millions of Americans, absolutely.
I believe when you and I perhaps sit down and do the first 100 days or first 6 months or first year in office, you will find very quickly that there are people in this country who feel like their lives have improved because Donald Trump was the president. That's how presidents are judged over time. And that's how I think it's just based on the accomplishments. We're here, I'm personally here, and not a lot of other places, because of those people. And so, look, I hear you completely. And Sean Spicer's out there every day doing his press briefing. I'm happy to have the platform in CNN and other places to explain and to talk about what we're trying to do inside this White House.
Are we fake news, Kellyanne? Is CNN fake news?
No, I don't think CNN is fake news. I think there are some reports everywhere, in print, on TV, on radio, in conversation, that are not well researched and are sometimes based on falsehoods. All the palace intrigue stories, I can't even tell you. Think about how small our staff was and how small our budget was for a presidential campaign, Jake, that succeeded and saw things other people didn't see. We breathe each other's oxygen in the foxhole. We are all very close. And all the palace intrigue stories for a White House is just constant action, constant movement. They're just not true, and they're actually beside the point and hurtful. But I just,
if you
I
think people behind you don't
I,
leak, I'm sad.
No, I'm sure.
I will sadly disabuse you of that notion.
I'm sure that's the case. But let me say something I think more pointedly, since you're talking to me, and I'm taking responsibility for something I said, and I'm trying to reach out and say, I am very open press. I've put out the olive branch. I'm on your show. Very much appreciate you having me and inviting me to be here. Just last week, while I was surrounded by a firestorm, a very prominent editor who's a contributor on a different cable news station, very prominent editor of a left-leaning site, outlet, emailed me and said, I'm about to run a story about your tweet on the Holocaust Remembrance Statement, but I wanted to give you an opportunity to respond. And I was at my daughter's play, and she was Annie, she was very good. And I emailed back, I said, did I tweet about that? And then he emailed back and he said, I'm so sorry. I'm hanging my head in shame. You carry on helping to run the country. That was a fake account. There's I'm told there's 10, 12, 15 parody accounts on Twitter about me and people, responsible. Now, I could have lit him up.
So it never aired.
Well,
it never ran.
Right, but remember, because I stopped
And the bigger issue with the
won't-
Holocaust Remembrance Day statement, of course, was that it didn't mention Jews.
No, you're talking about fake news. It's the presumptive negativity about us. It's always believing there's something negative. There's some nefarious motive.
It didn't run. I can't really work up much sweat about a story that didn't run.
Hold on, it didn't run because I got in the middle of it, but I'm not revealing his name because I know firsthand what it's like to have all the haters descend upon you. And I didn't
I'm glad
mention
that
his name.
reporter did his job and reached out to you before publishing anything.
Not everybody does. There's an article in the Daily. There's an article in the Daily Caller this week that I commend to everyone, which basically says the media's errors are starting to pile up in the Trump administration. And it lists 6 or 7 things that were said as fact that are just wrong, and people had to retract them. That's human nature, but it has to go both ways.
How about the president's statements, Kellyanne? How about the president's statements that are false, like the murder rate is the highest it's been in almost half a century? False. How about the fact that the media doesn't report on terrorist attacks? False. I mean, you can talk about some jerk with some website making a mistake or almost making a mistake.
Well, he's not a jerk. He's a friend of ours.
All right, he's a very sweet guy. But you can talk about somebody almost making a mistake and not doing it. I'm talking about the President of the United States saying things that are not true, demonstrably not true. That is important, and arguably more important than whoever reached you at your daughter's play.
Well, are they more important than the many things that he says that are true that are making a difference in people's lives? I just think we want coverage of that as well.
They distract from them. They distract from the things he says.
If they're covered, they do. And I think, look, I was handed a fact sheet that perhaps the president was referring to when he talked about that today with the sheriffs, which, by the way, was an unbelievably productive, moving listening session that I attended. But when he talks about the 47 years and the rate, I'm handed the information, I think you referred to it as well, that we have had an increase from 2014 to 2015.
Yeah, I said that.
In rapes and murders and assaults. I'm probably looking at the same data you are. And so he may have heard about a particular
FBI crime
city.
reports. But it's FBI. It's to say that there was a spike in murder rates between 2014 and 2015 is true. To say we need to bring that down and we need to have law and order, all that fine. He said it's the highest murder rate in 47 years, and the media doesn't report it. And again, Kellyanne, the media doesn't report it because it's a lie, because it's not true. And for the president to say that, is I can't even wrap my head around it. I'll give you the last word, and then I know you have to go.
Well, I'm fine. I'm having a good time. Thanks again for having me. I think that I will discuss it, but I think he is relying upon data perhaps for a particular area. I don't know who gave him that data, but I will tell you about the Sheriff's Roundtable. I mean, this is the part where I'm talking about complete coverage. That was just an amazing, some of those sheriffs, we allowed the media in their entire time. That was the president's idea. He even invited the media into the Oval Office while the sheriffs came in there to take some pictures. But at the actual listening roundtable, which was the most important piece of this, we heard from sheriffs who said they sat in those exact seats 6 months ago in a different administration, and they felt this time there was a president who actually asked them, what do you need? What is rankling you in your communities? And we heard to a person everything from asset forfeiture to opioid use, probably the most commonly stated thing, which of course I'm happy to have a piece of that in my portfolio here. We're going to be rolling that out very soon. It's something the president made a centerpiece of his campaign. He's greatly concerned about it. We'll be working with law enforcement, people on both sides of the aisle, families who have victims who talk about.
I would love to cover all of that, Kellyanne.
Thank you.
I would love to cover all of that. The attacks on the press, the attacks on judges, the falsehoods, all of that makes it very difficult. But I would love to cover all of that with you. Kellyanne Conway, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.